5 countries that went rapidly from rich to poor. A country's economic status can change over the course of centuries, decades, and even in just a few years. Many nations around the world today that are considered poor in terms of GDP per capita were actually once among the most affluent. GDP, or gross domestic product, is the measurement on the value of economic activity within a country. The higher the rate, the higher the country's output and the income of its citizens. Let's take a look at these 5 countries whose economies went rapidly from rich to poor. Number 5. Latvia. Latvia was one of the wealthiest nations in the Baltic region around the 1930s, even more so than its neighbors such as Denmark and Finland. The country's economic status went into a decline during the 1990s due to foreign invasion. It was in the Second World War, after a short period of German occupation, when Latvia was occupied and annexed by the USSR. It went downhill from there as the Soviet communist rule meant the nationalization of every private property in the country, as well as the forced consolidation of Latvia's booming industries of agriculture and timber exports. As the country has now become part of Russia's constrained economic sphere, this meant that Latvia was also cut off from the rest of the global market, most especially Europe and the USA. Fast forward to 1991. Latvia regained its independence and became part of the European Union. The country has since been making small but steady economic strides, although its latest GDP per capita continues to lag behind its neighbors it once outshone. Number 4. Philippines. The Philippines were well regarded in the 1960s as the second wealthiest nation in Asia, next only to Japan. However, wars, corruption, and bad choices of previous governments plunged the country's economy, making it one of the poor-performing economies in the world today. The Philippine GDP per capita in the 1950s had reached to a level that surpassed that of South Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, and other developed countries in the present. Many historians are quick to attribute the rampant corruption committed by the cronies of President Ferdinand Marcos as the cause of this downfall. However, there are other reasons that can be pointed out, such as the weak economic growth spurt during the Cory Aquino administration, the sellout of many state-held firms by President Fidel Ramos, and the economic mismanagement of the latter presidents like Joseph Estrada, probably one of the most incompetent politicians in the lineup. Number 3. Venezuela. Venezuela is yet another case of a country whose economy has been ravaged by its own people. This Latin American nation once held the title as the 4th richest country in the world in the 1950s, surpassing Canada, Australia, and Japan in terms of GDP per capita. It remains more prosperous than most of its neighbors in South America thanks to its huge oil reserve, which, according to experts, was the largest on the planet. Record-high oil prices coupled with a socialist government by Hugo Chavez that was bent on redistributing its wealth among its citizens made Venezuela one of the most enticing destinations in the West. However, the death of Chavez and the sudden decrease of crude prices in the global market changed the fortunes of Venezuelans. Furthermore, things took an ugly turn when Nicolas Maduro ascended to office.
Protests on the streets of Venezuela turning deadly after President Nicolas Maduro declares victory.
Aside from the crumbling financial state that he inherited from his predecessor, Maduro failed to take initiatives to safeguard Venezuela's oil-reliant economy. His administration even made some of the worst economic decisions, such as handing the army the duty of managing drug and food trades, as well as printing more money that drove up price inflation. Number 2. Mali. The plight of present-day Mali is way different from the glorious days of the country's empire. Hundreds of years ago, the Mali Empire was touted as one of the largest and the richest empires to ever rise in Africa. It reached its peak under the rule of Emperor Mansa Musa I from 1312 to 1337. Legend has it that Mansa Musa once made a pilgrimage to Mecca. Joining him were hundreds of other devotees, each of whom carrying bags of gold. When the party passed through Egypt, they gave away so much gold that it drove down its price. The Egyptian economy was affected and it struggled to recover for more than 2 decades. As you might have guessed, Mali was indeed a major gold producer for the sub-Saharan region. Their precious commodity was traded as far away as Persia, Genoa, Venice, and the rest of the known world. Soon enough, the kingdom went into a decline, its riches and power largely diminished through time. Today, Mali is one of the poorest African nations, with a GDP per capita of just $837. Its people relied mostly on foreign aid and occasional farming to survive. Number 1. Nauru. Nauru is yet another extreme case of a country that went from being one of the richest to being one of the most decrepit. Located between Australia and Hawaii, the tiny island republic of Nauru was once blessed with a huge phosphate deposit. The deposits, which came from bird droppings, actually made up the majority of the island's surface. The discovery of this fossilized bird poo changed the nation forever. Being an excellent fertilizer, it sparked huge mining efforts from both foreign companies and the islanders themselves around the 1960s. The rapid exportation of the natural resources spiked the country's GDP income to an unimaginable rate. By 1980, the once tiny, remote island was rolling in riches. But natural resources can only last for so long. Soon enough, Nauru's phosphate deposits ran out. The country's economy was hit right away with 90% unemployment and tons of importation debts. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this.